All right, everybody, welcome into episode 65 of Two Countries, Two Americas, All Sports. It's being recorded on February the 20th, 2023. I'm Nicholas Hill, live as always from Chattanooga, Tennessee, of the United States. And joining me from Americana, Sao Paulo, Brazil, is Gustavo Tomazeli on the only podcast that talks American and Brazilian sports. Gus, how are you doing here this evening?
Doing well, doing great, wearing my Portuguesa t-shirt in solidarity because they're not doing so well in the state championship. They're in the brink of relegation. I'm going to talk quite a bit about them in the Brazilian section of our podcast. Of course, we have a lot of basketball to talk since now we are getting to mid-February, early March, and that's kind of the basketball time in America from like February, I said, into June. You know,
Yeah.
plenty of college and pro basketball, a little bit of baseball, and even soccer, American and Brazilian soccer. Let's dive in.
And racing as well. So now racing season has begun here as well. So a lot, even though football is over, and of course that is the cultural centerpiece of American sports, there's plenty of stuff to kind of tie us over in the meantime. And we'll start off with basketball, as you mentioned, and we'll start off with our Vols, who are the most confusing basketball team I've ever seen. So last Wednesday, they upset number one Alabama for the program's fifth win ever against a number one team. And then they go up to Rupp and lose to Kentucky. This is the first time the Vols have been swept by Kentucky in a season since 2017. The first time that Barnes has been swept by Calipari. They only dropped one spot today in the AP poll, and right now a consensus free seed. So really, the loss Saturday didn't hurt that much in terms of seeding or rankings, but it felt like it really stops whatever momentum you could have built off of from last week's win versus Alabama. You could have really parlay yourself back into a two seed, or even if of a crazy run, maybe back into a one. Because I'll say this, the message I'm going to say about college basketball through the rest of the season, there are no great teams this year in college basketball. Everyone is vulnerable, and I can't tell you who's going to win a national championship. 20 teams could win a national title this year. Which, it makes the tournament exciting, but it's also going to make it infuriating. And for these volunteers, I have no idea what's going to happen in March. Because my brain tells me first weekend exit. But it also tells me, they still can make a deep run. But at the same time, I'm not, from my brain, from my emotional standpoint, I'm not putting the cards on the table here.
And maybe that's gonna be the driving factor into March is that this doubt, this not this team not being convincing enough. They might have to convince in March because in the past it's been the opposite. This team has you know great in the regular season, convince the fans, and then disappointed when they matter. Do you think there will be the opposite effect?
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, I'm not convinced at all. I'm not going to be convinced. I'm not picking this team to win March Madness. I'm just the offensive consistency is not there. Our willingness to attack the basket is not there. I mean, Kentucky just out physicaled us on Saturday. I mean, it was just really, really frustrating to see. Like, we were not going to the basket in the first half. The second half, it changed a bit. Santiago Vescovi was great in the second half. He was getting to the rim, but I saw no aggressiveness in the first half. He was not willing to go to the rim in the first half. And it's just like that. It looks like a player figures something out in a game and he's completely forgotten it the next game. It makes no sense, Gus.
I feel like this team. There's two scenarios. One scenario, which is the optimism scenario, which is this team, expose all their flaws, but they're able to fix it by March, or they don't fix it by then, and they only get it worse. And in the worst case scenario, as you kind of lay it out, they have a first round exit. So there's kind of two scenarios involved. I feel like first, um, I feel like those two wins over Tennessee kind of kept Calipari probably a little bit more time in Kentucky. I feel like those wins would be like, hey, I beat a really good team on at home and on the road, and I don't know. it's kind of because and I feel like the fans are kind of this nagging effect because in the past, Tennessee has always been consistent on the regular season, has been dominant in the SEC, and of course, the Wednesday win over Alabama probably show okay. Now we're gonna run the table, and on Saturday, Kentucky had a really good first half. Tennessee had a terrible first half, so that's the question. Which Tennessee is going to show up in March? The one versus Alabama or the one versus Kentucky?
That completely nails it, and I can't trust what this team looks like. And really, right now, I think my main concern, this team on the road is terrible. We've lost 3 straight road games. We lost at Florida, lost at Vanderbilt, and now lost at Kentucky. And tomorrow they're going all the way out to College Station against a really good Texas A&M team that's trying to maybe find a way to get the regular season title that has not lost yet this year at home. So if Tennessee doesn't get it together, they'll lose again tomorrow. It's not an easy game.
No, of course not. And for right now, according to ESPN's bracketology, Tennessee would have been it would have been playing Vermont. It would be a third seed in Greensboro, and
Which
it'll be
terrifies me, by the way. That matchup terrifies me.
and I think that the matchup, the other probable matchup, would have been interesting: Tennessee and Memphis. Wow,
That scares me. All these matchups scare me.
but imagine Rick Barnes again against Penny Hardaway in a playoff game.
That would be incredible. It would be incredible television. But could you
Oh,
imagine losing that game?
and I'll say this, and this time Penny Hardaway won't be able to escape because if you remember the last time, Tennessee showed up to the game, Memphis.
They didn't. They totally didn't.
Yeah, so what are they gonna do right now?
Man, I kind of hope that actually happens. But going into every single game in March, I'm going to be significantly doubting this Vols team. It's just the way it is now. They totally have the talent. Now, I think one of the big things is right now they need to get Julian Phillips back. They need to get Josiah Jordan-James back. That's huge. They're missing those two right now. Just from a defensive standpoint, their defense has fallen off a bit the past couple of weeks. And I think offensively, even though those two aren't the greatest scorers, they're at least options for you. I think Sakai Ziegler isn't playing very well right now. I think here's my thing with Ziegler. Like, Ziegler is great. I think he's great at running the point. I think he's tenacious on defense. The problem with Ziegler is he tries to be a hero too much. He tries to he takes shots that he shouldn't take and puts himself into situations he shouldn't be putting himself into, and is leading to a couple of turnovers, leading to a couple of bad rushed possessions that really are hurting this offense, especially when we go into scoring droughts. And I think it's just maturation with him. I think as he gets more experience, so we'll see less of it. But there was a time earlier on in the conference slate where he was playing as one of the best point guards in America. Like, he wasn't making any mistakes. But right now, it's just all over the place with him. And I want to see more from him because we're going to need him next month.
Oh, yeah, for sure. But I was going through the bracketology, and boy, if this matchup keeps it in the first matchups, Kentucky, North Carolina can be facing up in the first, like the pre-first round.
Yeah, the first 4.
The first 4. Wow, talk about a matchup there.
Yeah, it just goes to show you how much both of these teams have just severely underachieved this year. And then you look at the rest of that bracket there, and you got Clemson that's fallen to the first 4 because they lost to Louisville. Shout out to Louisville for getting one of their 4 wins this year. But Kentucky, North Carolina, if they don't make the tournament, it's a complete failure.
Yeah, I know, right? But how big of a failure does it have to get for Calipari to be at least like concerned about his job? Because from what I've seen, he feels safe as a Kentucky head coach basketball.
I don't think he'll get fired this year, even if he misses the tournament. But if he misses the tournament, he's on the flaming hot seat next year. That's just my opinion on Kentucky.
Oh, I
But
agree.
yeah, but as
But in
long
terms of
as they do enough, he'll be fine.
and going through back, good to see San Diego State again. Hopefully, they have got their good run. Remember 2020, they were so hot coming up to March, and then the tournament got canceled.
Yeah. I don't know. Is Dayton in here? I don't know if Dayton's in here because Dayton's the team I think that really got screwed in 2020 with Obi Toppin. Like that was a once in a generation team for the Flyers, and they'll never get a chance again to repeat that. I don't see
Yeah,
Dayton.
Dayton's not in here.
Yeah, yeah. I always feel terrible for them because San Diego State I think is more apt to come back for more runs from time to time, but Dayton isn't. So, but that's just. I don't know, it's just so it's really sad to think about.
But going over the next two matchups Tennessee have, on the road tomorrow versus Texas A&M, and then at home versus South Carolina. As you point out, Tennessee has been a terrible team on the road, but at least good-ish at home because they lost to Missouri and Kentucky.
Yeah, and Missouri was a last second miracle shot, so they really should have won that one. Although they got behind by 17, so maybe I shouldn't say that. What I would anticipate this week, tomorrow's going to be a very tough game. Honestly, if I'm a neutral observer, I'd pick A&M to win. I don't trust these Vols right now on the road. They're going to have to earn my trust back as a road team. On
I mean,
Saturday,
the last four matchups they only beat Alabama.
yeah. And then what was our last road win?
The last road win, I believe, was no, I want to say LSU.
Oh
LSU.
my gosh, it's been a month since we won on the road.
Yeah, it been after that LSU win, they lost to Florida, Vandy, and Kentucky.
I'm trying to think. So we're 0-1, 4-1, 4-2, 4-3. Right now we're 4-4 in true road games. I mean, we're not doing well at all this year on the road. Because our last two road games are at A&M and at Auburn. So I know we beat Auburn at home, but I don't know if we're going to beat them there. So it's not good. So I mean, I don't know. What's even the line on this game? Let's see. Let's see who is favored here.
And I want to see also how's the. Go ahead.
A&M's favored by 1.5. A&M is favored by 1.5. So Tennessee's the underdog here. So is this a spot? Because it seems like with Barnes teams, when they come into a game as an underdog, they come out and win and play a lot better. Is this a spot where they come out and do that Barnes thing where they come out and win a big game?
And I mean, right now there are four, so I guess they're by really a threat because they're fourth in the SEC. So, but I say to at least finish ahead of Kentucky because right now Kentucky is ahead of us, I guess, by the difference in terms of conference wins. And as you said, Texas A&M is fighting with Alabama to win the regular season title.
Yeah, so I mean, tomorrow's a massive, massive game for Kentucky, and also Vanderbilt. I mean, Vanderbilt, like they're at this point, honestly, maybe approaching bubble team status. I know they're only 15-12, but they're 8-6 in conference play. And they're just on a roll right now.
Yes,
It's like Tennessee is reuniting a lot of people's seasons.
That's true. I mean, and is it Tennessee is going to face the number two team, the second, the number the in the standings face the second team, Texas A&M. Then they face the bottom South Carolina, the bottom three. Then they face on the road Arkansas, which is number number 6, I believe, number 7, and then number 6 Auburn. So, I mean, it's not an easy schedule to end it
No,
up this season.
at least South Carolina here should be. I mean, they absolutely dominated South Carolina in Columbia, but I feel like Carolina has improved some since then. Um, and I don't think we can say the same for Tennessee. So I don't want to count my chickens before they hatch there too. Knock on wood with the pun with chicken hatch, but
I mean, do you know who's right now the longest winning streak in the SEC?
Vandy.
Vandy, 5 wins. I mean, they were at 3-6. Now they're 8-6.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, they still are probably going to have to win the SEC tournament to make the tournament, to make the NCAA tournament. But they might do that.
I mean, they're the hottest team right now.
Yeah, I mean, they're a dangerous team. No one wants to play Vanderbilt right now. So I expect Tennessee to at least beat South Carolina, and then tomorrow night's a 50-50 game. That's my thoughts for this week.
I feel like tomorrow night's game, Tennessee will win on a last second shot. They lost to Vandy and Missouri on the last second shot. I think they're gonna win on the last second shot.
I could see that. Kind of get the mojo back.
Yeah,
I'll take it.
but I mean, I feel like right now Tennessee, that's gonna be the last true test. I mean, not even Auburn consider a test. I mean, this Texas A&M team, they're also on a 5-game winning streak, so it should be an interesting test for this Rick Barnes team.
Yeah. Meanwhile, on the other side, on the women's side, real quick, the Lady Vols, they finished up their last home game yesterday. They beat Auburn. And Lady Vols, according to women's bracketology, they're a 7 seed right now. So they have gone off the bubble. And they would be projected to be in a region with Oregon, Little Rock, and Iowa. And that, I think, would be a horrible match because I think Caitlin Clark and Iowa would absolutely light this team up. Like, Tennessee cannot score with Iowa.
Yeah, I mean, from what I see, it's interesting because when Holly Warlick got fired, she was also on the lowest seed. So I don't know. I've seen kind of a trend in terms of Kelly Harper. As we discussed, in the prior episodes, maybe it's time to go outside of the Pet Summit tree, like Alabama did outside of the Briar Bryant tree.
Maybe. Well, Kelly's got herself a big opportunity this Thursday because you want to know who comes to Knoxville on
South
Thursday?
Carolina.
Yep, number 1 South Carolina, who themselves they did have to beat Ole Miss in overtime yesterday. So it's not like South Carolina is invincible.
And
They are
and last
undefeated.
year, and last season was the biggest win on Kelly Harper's Tennessee career.
That's 2 years ago. 2 years ago.
Oh
I
my
think.
God, it's been 2 years. Oh my
Yeah, it's been
God.
2 years. Yeah, because they didn't beat Carolina last year.
Oh my God. So time flies. Oh my God. Yeah, that's true. It's been 2 years.
Yeah, but obviously that's a massive game for Kelly and the Lady Vols. So they got to find a way. I mean, not even if to beat South Carolina, just do what Ole Miss did yesterday. Be competitive. Take it down to the wire. That will give me more confidence about this team as we head into the SEC tournament, which is next week for women's. Because all the women's tournaments and the mid-major tournaments are next week. So really starting next week, it's going to be really high in time to go
So
into some
this
college
time going to
basketball.
be all in the same week. I remember first was the ladies and then was the men's.
But no, I'm talking about mid majors, like Chattanooga's conferences, SoCon, ASUN, but like smaller conferences,
Oh,
like the Gonzaga's conference and stuff like that. Now, like the men still have 2 weeks of regular season before they go to their conference, but the women they play a week before the men. So, um, yeah, and then so in 2 weeks from Sunday is the selection Sunday. So we're coming right down to the end. So it's going to be exciting to watch all the bubble teams fight for their lives, and you know, should be a good one.
Yeah, it would be, good test for Kelly Harper. Hopefully, she got the win, so at least she gets, some juice for for March. But it's going to be a really hard test coming to Knoxville on Thursday.
Oh, absolutely. Let's see what else. Oh yeah, let's go transition over to the Diamond because the baseballs started the season on Friday night out in Arizona, and if we're going to be honest, it didn't start off the best. They lost to Arizona Friday night. I think it was 3-2, and then they went out on Saturday night to Grand Canyon, which is also in Phoenix, and they had the lead, but Grand Canyon came back and won 4-3. And yesterday they did finish out the weekend with a win against UC Santa Barbara, 8-0, but still 1-2. Offense wasn't the best. You can tell they've had to replace basically an entire lineup. They don't have the heavy hitters that they once did, or at least they haven't developed into the heavy hitters they're going to need. And really, I think my biggest concern I took away, because the pitching is not a concern. I think Dollander, Burns, Drew Beam are going to be fine. I trust them as starters. I think we do need to develop some depth in the bullpen, but I think that'll just come with time. My concern with Tennessee, and I remember, Jason and I had this conversation. We had this conversation last year when we lost to Notre Dame. The thing I think that doomed Tennessee last year was the fact that they couldn't play small ball, the fact they couldn't find ways to score outside of home runs. And I'm concerned that when you look at the Vols this year, if they can't hit the home runs as consistently, then where's the offense going to come from? Because I feel like last year they got so used to scoring off of homers that they weren't finding ways to score otherwise. And now this year, I think they're going to have to do the complete opposite. I think they got to find ways to score otherwise. And part of that is base running. And honestly, the biggest red flag I saw this week, some of the base running was just terrible. Like, there was one case where I forget who it was, but he was trying to go from first to third. And so the shortstop gets it at the ball falls in front of the shortstop. This guy's running over from first. The shortstop throws it back over to the first baseman. He throws it over, so it looks like he has a chance to run to third. But then the ball bounces right back to the first baseman, and he throws the guy out at third with so much room. And then there's just some other cases, too, of just us being uber aggressive. And it constantly backfiring. We left so many men on base on the two losses. We can't do that in the SEC. You can't do that in the SEC tournament. You can't do that in the NCAA tournament. That's what doomed us last year against Notre Dame. And Tennessee right now just fell to 6. So we're still top 10. But I'm definitely very concerned about what I saw, at least offensively, from the opening weekend.
I mean, as you described, resetting a roster is not easy. I think Tony Vitello definitely will find the team's rhythm as SEC schedule starts, but definitely, starting 1 and 2, it's not the best, but I think the team will find their rhythm.
Yeah, they got some easier games. They got Alabama, A&M, and Dayton this week, so hopefully they'll win all those and really find a way to get into rhythm before you get into SEC play here in a couple of weeks. So, I'm not in panic mode yet, but I was kind of concerned what I saw this past weekend. But, I just have to accept that, not every team is going to look like last year. Like, every team has a different journey. And, Ole Miss, the team that won the title last year, they didn't look great for most of the year. So, but it's all about being where you need to be in June. And let's be honest, the Vols last year peaked in April. And that ended up being an absolute, unfortunately, backfired on the Vols at the end of the season. So,
actually, on that series against Notre Dame, that was heartbreaking.
Oh, absolutely. And I would rather lose now than lose in June. So, hopefully they learn what they need to learn um, from this weekend. Also, shout out softball. They're doing pretty well right now. They are, what's this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7-1. Only loss for now is to Fullerton. They're killing it at 7-1.
Is the Ralph and Karen Weekly the coaches still? I guess I
I
think
think
only
so.
Karen.
Yeah. Yes. Or actually, no. Karen's just the coach now.
Yeah, I guess that's only Karen now.
Yeah. So, hey, they're still killing it over there. So we'll see what they do when they get into conference play. All right, off from Rocky Top and down to the banks of Daytona, because this weekend was the first full NASCAR weekend, and of course the Great American Race, the Daytona 500. Ricky Stenhouse Jr., an underdog, wins the Daytona 500. I believe only his third win of all of his career, and obviously his biggest win, winning a major, is obviously just an incredible accomplishment for him. I mean, to win that race is huge. It means everything for any star car driver to win the Daytona 500. But I said this was the 59th year of the run of its running. So obviously a great win for him. But man, I can tell you this: I feel gutted for Kyle Busch. Kyle Busch is probably the most successful driver of his generation. He's won 60 races in Cup, 200 overall when you count both the Busch Series, or the Xfinity Series, and the Truck Series. He has 2 championships. He had the race possibly won with like 3 laps to go when Daniel Suarez got spun. They threw the caution, and they basically what happened is, so for the first time this year, they're allowing the drivers to choose their lanes on the super speedways. They were allowing them to do this at other tracks last year. So Busch chose the outside lane. His teammate Austin Dillon comes to the inside, and Kyle Busch comes out in front of Dillon, and they try to push themselves to the win, but the momentum just didn't work out in their favor, and Busch got shuffled back, and he ended up getting crashed at the end of the race. And Kyle Busch came out in a press conference afterwards, and he was like, "These were old school rules where the Daytona 500 was actually the Daytona 500, and we ended on lap 200. I would have won because this race actually went 212 laps, 530 miles." And I just honestly, I've come to some conclusions. I think on these super speedways, these overtimes are excessive. They're encouraging a lot of crashing. They're encouraging just ultra aggression. I really think they got to find a way to rein back the overtimes here. Understand everyone wants to see a finish under green, but we're not even getting finishes under green half the time. I mean, they're crashing anyway. So it's better off to finish at 200 at the Daytona 500. I mean, the Indianapolis 500 always finishes at lap 200. It's always the Indy 500. The Daytona 500's not even the Daytona 500 anymore, because it's always finishing at like lap 205, lap 210, lap 212. So it just doesn't make any sense to just continuously go on and on and on. Gus, where you want to say something?
No, I was gonna say, yeah, that's kind of, when you kind of lax the rules, you make people kind of confused, and not. It's interesting. I mean, race involves danger, but if you set some firm rules, then it's like, find a way. Like, if there's a crash, then I don't know. I know it's hard to be a racing commissioner, but it's I get the point of Kyle Busch, but always, like, it's like in soccer, like, of course you're gonna complain about that if you're in your favor, but if it was the opposite, Kyle Busch would have won, he would have not say anything about it.
No, I mean, and I'll say this: I think this is probably the single most heartbreaking loss he's ever had. I mean, this was the closest he ever has been to winning a Daytona 500. This is the last thing he needs to complete his legacy. I mean, it's like Dale Earnhardt back in 1998. Dale Earnhardt had won everything, 7 championships, 70 races, but he just needed a 500. Kyle Busch just needs a 500, and he can't get one. And I'm afraid it's going to end like a Tony Stewart, where he wins everything else but doesn't get a 500, and that's just empty. It's like an IndyCar. Like, you could win every other IndyCar race, you could win every Indy championship, But if you never win the Indianapolis 500, did you really win anything at all? No. I mean, it is the race. And it's just, I feel gutted for him, you know? And it's
Shout
just
out
kind
to
of the one of those weird things. Oh, shout out to Bruno.
Bruno Slone. I saw him this weekend. We covered the same game here in Rio Claro, and I'm gonna talk about that game in the Brazilian time. But me and Bruno had a really good time. Shout out to Bruno Slone, always a listener. We had a good time on Sunday in the city of Rio Claro. But get to the point. I mean, I feel like Daytona is one of those landmarks that is almost as big as the championship itself.
Oh, absolutely. And I wish it's just become so much of a wild card. There's got to be a way to balance out the excitement. 'Cause I understand people want to see the big ones and all that, but at the same time, I want to see racers to settle races, and I don't feel like they're being allowed to do that right now. And it's just, I don't know. But at least we get some other tracks that are coming up that aren't as much of a wild card. So that's good. Now, I do want to rant about something, and doesn't have to really do with the race. But I thought the race itself was pretty good. I got to rant about the broadcast. NASCAR on Fox put on one of the worst sports broadcasts I've ever seen. They put on, so in the span of 200 laps, they put on 22 commercial breaks. That's about a commercial break every 7 laps. It was ridiculous. There were times where they would come back, show about 3 laps, and then go back to commercial. I mean, fortunately, I found a Saudi Arabian channel website on the internet, so I was kind of starting to watch. I watched it through that because at least when there was a quote unquote commercial break, they kept an international feed going. But if you were watching on American television, you missed about over a quarter of green flag laps in this race. And even when the Fox broadcast was on, I don't think the commentators did that great of a job. I think they were not keeping up with pit strategy well. I think it was kind of confusing to keep up with what incidents were going on. Apparently, they missed some spins at some times. They missed some saves. And obviously, I knew what was going on because I'm a diehard NASCAR fan. But if you were a casual fan tuning into the biggest race of the year, you would have had no idea what was going on because they were not explaining things very well. And I really think now, because here's the big thing with NASCAR. At the end of next year, this current television rights deal comes up. And right now you have 2 partners. You have Fox and you have NBC. I think NBC does a phenomenal job. I love NBC's NASCAR broadcast, and I think it's far better than what Fox brings. Fox has been around since 2001. They used to be phenomenal. Right now, they're just atrocious. They have fallen off. They turned the sport into a joke. Like, they use these comic book fonts for the drivers now, so they're actual pictures. That makes no sense. It's just one big commercial. And I get that NASCAR is driven by its sponsors, and I'm totally fine with that. But you got to actually show us a sport, man, because I'm tuning in to watch racing.
I thought on racing when it goes to commercial was like you still keep like some percentage of the actual image going, and you kind of cut the like the percentage of the space in the TV, and then you go to like F1 does that, like you show on the side, not on total screen.
They did that sometimes, mostly towards the end of the race, but early on, it was full screen. So they would cut away from the entire race. And it was just so bad. I mean, like in US F1 is commercial free. The Indianapolis 500 is always, they have commercials, but you can always see what's going on. They always have the side-by-side thing. For NASCAR is the only sport where the sanctioned body lets the TV broadcasters show full screen commercials over live action. And it's a disgrace. It's a disgrace to the fans. And I think it's honestly hurting the ratings. I think it's hurting the potential fan growth because people don't want to sit through commercials. I'm sorry. This is 2023. People have streaming services. They have illegal streams. They have ways to go watch. It was easy for me just to pop on the Saudi Arabian website yesterday and watch a commercial free. Most people aren't going to do that, though. I'm going to do that because I want to watch the race. Most other people won't. So NASCAR's in the next TV deal needs to find a way to get more screen time, more racing time, and less commercial time. because there's ways to get more the sponsors in the race itself. I mean, look at soccer. You don't stop the game for commercials. You just put the commercials around the field.
Yeah.
You know,
No, I
you
couldn't
have
even
commercials on the
imagine it.
cars.
It would be riots here if they ever do that in a soccer game in Brazil. Could not even imagine you cutting the feed of the game to show full commercial. Like, I couldn't even
Imagine if they
imagine.
did that for NFL. Imagine like you're driving, the offense is driving. Imagine did that SEC, like Tennessee gets the ball back, second position of the game. Like CBS is like, oh, we're going to cut away from the game to show you these commercials while they're playing. No, they wouldn't do that.
I kind of compare to soccer because like racing is a non-stop kind of, because in football and basketball and baseball you have like dead periods between the game, like multiple dead periods. Like soccer you have one big dead period which is halftime, and then in racing you don't even have that. But and one thing I was kind of thinking about as you describe about this issue is that, do you think we'll ever come to a point where the league itself will produce the broadcasting, and then the TVs will only buy the rights to show the image of, like, for example, here in the
That's what I'm
South.
hoping for. I desperately want NASCAR to do what F1 does. I would love that because that's what F1 does.
Yeah, here in Brazil, for example, the Paulistão, the Police State Championship, is now the images come from straight from the league broadcasting produced, not the TV holder.
Yeah,
I think that's the
I mean,
future.
that's the future. I mean, TV networks are depending on these sports to keep them relevant, not the other way around. TV needs sports. Sports doesn't need TV. And the rest of these, and we've seen like MLS. MLS is going to Apple TV. They don't need TV anymore. I mean, NASCAR could follow suit here at the end of next year. I think it would be wise for them to, because I think the current TV model is actively keeping away younger fans. And that's what the thing they have to focus on more than anything right now, because the average age of a NASCAR fan is in their upper 50s, and they're not developing the younger fan base at a rate to replace that. And they should be focusing every single one of their resources into getting those younger fans in. And you're not going to do that with the current model, where the fans can't even watch the race for more than a couple laps at a time. So they got to fix that.
Oh yeah, I agree. I feel like the future is the like a standardized broadcasting way in all leagues. Like, for example, there cannot be a discrepancy between what Fox broadcasts in NASCAR and what NBC does it, because the sport is still the same. That's what NASCAR and any other sport league have to concern about. It's like produce kind of standardized way to show your product. It can't be like Fox does it one way, NBC does the other. Because still
Yeah,
your
I mean,
image.
NBC takes it so seriously too. Like NBC, like when you look at their commentary booth, I think one of the things Fox is missing right now in their broadcast booth. So normally, your average NASCAR booth, you have your lead commentator, you have a former star driver, and then you'll have a crew chief, a former crew chief, someone who knows the strategy, knows the making of the car. The driver will commentate on what the driver is doing on the racetrack. Fox right now, what they're doing is they have a lead commentator, Mike Joy, who's done this forever. You have Clint Boyer, who's a permanent announcer. He's a former driver, won 10 races. And they're having a rotating third guest. So for the 500 was Tony Stewart, obviously a legend in NASCAR and IndyCar. The problem with that is you don't have a crew chief buff there. And I think yesterday there were several green flag pit cycles where where drivers were pitting under green, and it was affecting the outcome of the race, especially towards the end. They had like a pit cycle of about 25 laps to go that if the race had went green would have totally had direct results on who would have won. We didn't really have a good explanation for what was going on there. And I was able to follow it just because, I watched this. But you need a crew chief in there. Like Larry McReynolds used to be that for Fox, but now he's kind of sitting back in the studio giving analysis from time to time. They need like a Chad Knaus or someone like that to be in the booth permanently to give strategic calls. NBC has that. They have Steve Letarte. He crew chief for Jeff Gordon and Dale Earnhardt Jr. He knows what he's talking about. and he's great at commentating the strategy of the races. And they still have Dale Hurt Jr. and Jeff Burton, given the former driver, commentating of the game. It just doesn't make any sense what Fox is doing as a broadcasting company. And I'm not like NBC's perfect. NBC still has full screen commercials too, but at least when they're actually showing the race, it's really, really good. And Fox is just not. They're just not competing. The Fox is just silly. I feel like Fox is too silly. They treat NASCAR as a joke. They treat it as probably one of my favorite NASCAR YouTubers, Eric Eastep, would say, a Sunday leisurely drive. But they don't emphasize how like intense it is. NBC will actually kind of emphasize how intense NASCAR is. These guys are racing at 200 miles an hour right next to each other, and at any time they could go flying for the fence. I mean, it's an intense sport, and Fox, I really don't think is capturing the intensity of what these guys are actually doing. Like when you watch Indianapolis 500, just for comparison, they do an amazing job of showing how intense that is. How, going at 220 miles an hour is death defying. Like, we need the commentators are going to talk about how death defying NASCAR is and really convey that to the audience.
Yeah, I definitely agree, and I feel like NASCAR is such an American product more than IndyCar. I think IndyCar, some level, is a little bit like international. Like they try to popularize in Brazil. Fortunately, it didn't go as much as I thought. I really thought IndyCar was going to be popular in Brazil. They really did a push back in 2010, 11, 12, 13, 14, but unfortunately, it didn't work out. But I think NASCAR is really an American racing product, and if you don't, take care of your product, probably in the next 10, 15 years, F1 racing will surpass it. Because in Liberty Media, an American company, owns F1, so they're trying everything they can. They're going really, really, strong to try to popularize, yeah, F1,
Absolutely.
and they're coming off a really hard time because you remember the debacle that happened in Indy with F1, so they're really trying to recuperate kind of the audience, and they already have 3 racing in America:
Yeah.
Miami, Texas, and I believe there's
Las
going to be another,
Vegas.
Las
Las
Vegas.
Vegas. Yeah, this year, and that's debuting this year. And I was about to bring that up. F1 now literally has 3 events. F1's coming for you, NASCAR, and you need to adapt fast. I mean, and NASCAR's trying some stuff like the Chicago Street Race later this year. I think that's a great experiment. Hopefully, that
Yeah,
race goes
we one
really,
is
really
good.
well. Yeah, so I really, we need that race to be really good, um, just for the future of the sports. So, um, I'll say this: I thought as much complaining as I've done about the broadcast, the actual race itself was good. But you shouldn't have to be deep into NASCAR like I am to appreciate how the race actually turned out yesterday. Because anyone who watched it should be able to enjoy it. And I just think the way Fox is presenting these races is preventing people from actively enjoying it. And your broadcast partners should not be ruining your race. So that's my piece on NASCAR on Fox. I was just very unhappy with how they presented the biggest race of the year yesterday.
Just quick shout out to my friend Miguel Ribeiro, a really good radio personality, saying good night, good night.
Ojinachi.
But anyway, let's go to some NBA because they had their All Star weekend, and I'll stay there. I mean, NBA, I don't know what they have to do. I was thinking about this. The way they're showing, presenting the NBA All Star week is, demising and under kind of making less valuable the actual all-star game, because they do so much stuff during the week that you kind of makes it the main event kind of the like, oh my god, like I feel like I don't know what they should do it, but I feel like making an all-star week instead of an all-star game is kind of making the actual game less relevant.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. This whole team, LeBron versus Team Giannis nonsense. go back to East versus West. I mean, what was wrong with that? It was the classic Eastern Conference or Western Conference, and that was the whole point of it, is to show what conference was the best. Um, and right now, there's just I don't care who's better between Team Giannis and Team LeBron. I mean, that doesn't show anything because I mean, and then to start off the game with a draft, like it almost feels like it's one person's opinion who is being an all star, and who and like or exactly they are as an all star. Um, I don't know. It's just
That's why NFL is still the king, because I for player to be, I mean, people players don't care so much about playing the Pro Bowl, but being kind of in the Pro Bowl, kind of being elected in the Pro Bowl, kind of being one of the all kind of all star in the NFL is still is relevant.
yeah, and that's just not. And it'd be one thing too if it were actually a competitive game. But these people like that, if they just stand around and just walk around and they're just trying crazy dunks and stuff, it's just not. It's just not interesting, you know.
I mean, we have to give shout out to the Major League Baseball. I mean, they still makes a good product of their All Star game, because
Yeah,
it's like it's a 2 day event. It's the Home Run Derby, which is a great, pre-game kind of day, and then you have the actual game. I mean, I'm still in the fans, of I still think it was kind of fun to have the, who had the home field advantage for the World Series being decided on the All Star game. I think it'll make it kind of more, a game more relevant. But I still think MLB does best because, you know, the players don't care about the All Star game, and fans don't care about the All Star game.
no, and I don't know how you make these players care about it, and that's what's going to matter. Like if these players were actually going at it, it would be an amazing event. I would totally sit down and watch these guys actually play each other. Um, they just don't. And I think it goes back to the whole load management thing. They don't want to unload manage themselves for the All Star game. Um, I just yeah, it sucks because you look at older All Star games; those guys actually played, and it was awesome. But they don't do that anymore. And
Like, what's funny, Nick, is that the NFL has been around the same time as the NBA, kind of started in the 50s and 60s, had a really good run in the 70s, 80s, and 90s as Dynasty. But now I think the discrepancy is even bigger because right now NFL is still relevant. People still tune in the regular season more than ever in the playoffs. Players really, like look at the playoffs. We had two main players, two quarterbacks playing their A off, injured, and in NBA we talk about low management.
yeah, I mean, like quite literally, I saw there's been a series of TikToks recently about people talking about why they don't like the NBA as much anymore. And I saw this one guy who said he grew up wanting to go to the NBA and he idolized basketball. But now he can barely care less about the regular season, especially because these people have realized their dream. They're at the top of their profession, but they're finding every reason not to play. Um, you know, I
And you
feel
don't see
like
that
some of
in
these
the NFL. You don't see that in the NFL.
no. Man, I say obviously, there's a lot less games in the NFL, so you kind of can't just sit out. Um,
But you have,
but
but one I compare like one game in the NFL, kind of like 3 and 4 in the NBA of physicality and impact. I mean the NFL has way more impact and injury kind of ways than the NBA.
oh yeah, and I know obviously basketball can be physical, um, but you're not banging your head like you are in football. Um, you know, I mean, I know it's like kind of you're trying to like help your joints out and stuff like that, but
But I think the NBA all go back to kind of it's like a series of events. Like start with the one and done, weekend, the college basketball, and then the ripple effect is this new NBA where you don't have these no probably really few uprising stars. Like you can name like in the last draft, who was the biggest star everybody was excited about? No one from the actual American basketball system.
No, look, all the exciting players are coming from outside. Giannis, Luca. You got Wembanyama that's coming. Um, they're all not from America. Who from college basketball right now are you excited about to see the next level? Trace Jackson Davis from Indiana, maybe. There's no one exciting. There's no one in the SEC I've seen this year that I'm like, okay, yeah, that's an NBA player. It's just not
because the
it's not what it
NBA
used
has
to be.
because the NBA is thinking short term instead of long term. Like NFL and college football have a partnership. NFL understands that college football produce the best players in a very mature way, and NBA is like, oh no, you have to like go do this 1 year mandatory, then you come to us and you come unprepared, not undeveloped, and then you ended up ruining the best asset that you have in your league, which is the players.
Yeah. Yeah, it's because I feel like I said this last week where when it comes to college basketball, I think they need to get rid of the one and done system. I think you need to force these guys to be in college for 3 years or go straight out of high school. Because college basketball itself right now is just not very good. There's not recognizable stars. You got like Drew Tim, but like the average sports fans can't tell you who that is. The thing about this, 20 years ago, people could tell you who Adam Morrison was for Gonzaga. People could tell you who Carmelo Anthony was for Syracuse. How many basketball players do you know outside of Tennessee? I mean, I can't name you a single player for Texas A&M, and we play him tomorrow. I can't. Brandon Miller for Alabama, but we just play them, so they're on my mind. There's Oscar Sheboy up in Kentucky, but we play them regularly. I can't name you a single Duke player. I can't name you. Of course, I named you one Indiana player.
Like the blue bloods, you can't name one Duke player, one North Carolina player, one Kansas.
I can't
player.
name a UCLA. I can't tell a UCLA player. Holy cow! You really can't. College basketball outside of a few weeks in March has become completely irrelevant, and it's trickling into the NBA. Well, the NBA is only relevant from April to June.
Like it's getting to a point that like college basketball in the college baseball in the past was not seen kind of. It's been developing kind of almost to a point. And I'll say college baseball is better than college basketball, but I think they're on a rise. I feel like you see more players coming out of college, kind of not ready, but recognizable, and see kind of the best product being developed at college baseball than college basketball.
Yeah, think about what Chase Dorlander and Chase, or not Chase Dorlander, Chase Burns, and why am I blanking on Dolander's first name? I cannot remember his first name, but anyway, but Dollander and Burns, those two guys are going to the MLB. They're going to be top 10 picks. And when they go to the major leagues, I'm going to be following them because I developed that relationship with them in college, just watching them. And there's several guys that came out last year for the Vols I have that relationship with. Because the last player I felt about that way in the NBA is Grant Williams. And by the way, on the side note, congratulations to Grant Williams. He is now the vice president for the NBA PA. So congratulations to Grant. Good dude, great player. I really wish we still had him.
It was not a surprise because he always showed kind of maturity and leadership in Knoxville. It was meant to be. He felt like this player that was so bright in the court and outside the court. So happy for him.
Oh, absolutely. I love to see him thriving. The last few weeks have really made me more and more appreciate what he brought here to Knoxville. But yeah, it's just NBA All Star Game. I don't know what you do to it, but yeah, you got to fix it. The only positive note I really have from this weekend is Mac McClung. I mean, you remember Mac McClung? You know, he's from the Tri Cities. Uh, grew up in Gate City, Virginia, which is right down the road from Kingsport, Tennessee. Um, he just absolutely lit up the dunk contest. I'm not a guy who really like loves the dunk contest anymore. I loved it as a kid, but man, he had one of the best performances of all time Saturday night. Um, some of those dunks he threw down were just incredible, and you could tell he took it seriously. And if they had more players that took their competitions and this game seriously, like Mac McClung, then the NBA All Star game would be great. We need more Mac McClungs.
Oh yeah, I feel like I remember Vince Carter in the dunk contest. He was just a great.
I think McClung was the best since Carter. I mean, he was just phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. So congratulations to him. NBA, get it together on the All-Star weekend because that was just terrible. But anyway, moving on real quick to some football. The XFL, not the NFL, the XFL restarted for the first time in 3 years. And
Or as Vince McMahon will say, the extra fun league.
yeah, the extra fun league. I tried watching a little bit of this. I just can't get into it. It's just not as good football. It's not even close to the NFL, you know,
I mean,
or even college football.
the only thing I saw that was interesting was the DC Defenders fans throwing lemons on the field because they were mad because they used to have kind of cup holder, kind of like some sort of a
The
tradition
beer
of,
snake.
yeah, the beer snake, and then they took it away. You know, it's just weird to throw lemons. I wish I like lemons, but the
I don't understand
defenders are,
why they were trying to why they were banning them from doing beer snakes.
yeah, it's like the XFL was like, hey, we had a good tradition of fans. Let's take it away because that will make people want to go more to the games. Like, great idea.
I mean, they haven't even finished a season, so I mean, you know, you gotta finish a season first before you do stuff like that. But
Yeah,
I don't really have
so
anything to say in the games.
the DC Defenders beat the Seattle Sea Dragons 22-18. The St. Louis Battlehawks defeated San Antonio Bahamas 18-15. Orlando Guardians beat the Houston Roughnecks 33-12. And in the opening game of the XFL, the Arlington Renegades beat the Vegas Vipers 22-20. I mean, I feel like those leagues, what could have been fun was having those leagues been played while NFL is happening, because that would be, I feel like NFL would be good to have a minor league in the NFL because teams will benefit from. Imagine, you know, you have a minor league system like the MLB or G League, and the players will compete. And then, if, like, for example, the San Francisco 49ers need a four string quarterback, they would have in their minor league system.
Actually, that's not a bad point. I almost wonder if we're going to see that eventually. Of course, right now you only have 8 teams here, but you're also going to have USFL start here in April, so that's going to be an additional 10 teams. So you have 18 teams. There could be a scenario where if you have enough minor league teams, you could have each team assign themselves a minor league team to trade with.
Because for me, it was interesting that you have Major League Baseball and NBA having minor league systems, and the NFL, which is a massive product, you know, the biggest league right now. Football is more popular than ever. You don't have and not only the teams and the players would benefit, cities that don't have a pro team or like a really interesting college football program, they would benefit it from.
I think what they really they need to target more mid-sized cities like Chattanooga. Um, you know, when I look at this list of XFL teams, Las Vegas has an NFL team. Arlington has the Dallas Cowboys. Houston has allegedly they have an NFL team. I haven't seen them in a couple of years though. Or Orlando, just right down the road from Tampa. St. Louis. Now that's a market that was abandoned by the NFL. So there's one. San Antonio doesn't have an NFL team. There's two. Seattle. They have the Seahawks. DC has the Commanders. So
Allegedly.
allegedly. So they have out of the 8 teams here, 2 are in markets that I think are really good for their product. But what about places like Memphis? What about places like Birmingham? What about places like a Chattanooga?
Or even Oakland. I mean, Oakland was abandoned by all pro teams. I mean, like Oakland was a city that was like completely like NBAs are like for this close to moving. So Oakland would be a totally forgotten sports town.
Yeah, I don't know. I think you got to go for places that are growing, and Oakland's just not a place that's growing. I think you got to go to a place, a place that you wouldn't even think of. What about like Fargo? I mean, you got the Fargo Dome. I mean,
Or Boise State. Imagine playing a team in that blue field.
Salt Lake City doesn't have an NFL team. You could go there. And there's plenty of cities out there that I think would welcome in a team. I mean, Albuquerque, New Mexico doesn't have any pro teams. You could go there. Oklahoma City doesn't have a pro team. I don't know if they have a stadium in Oklahoma City. I mean, you have the OU field down in Norman, which is technically in the OKC area. You got Little Rock, Arkansas. There's a place. Louisville, they don't have a pro team. I mean, as I said, there's several places you could go and really find ways to really uniquely grow the market, because you're not going to outdo the NFL. That's just not happening. But you got to find, like, the minor league teams, the Lookouts aren't going to move to Atlanta, They're not going to try to outstage the Braves. The Lookouts are going to stay in Chattanooga because they know where they can be successful. The Smokies aren't moving to Nashville and try to compete with a potential new MLB team there. They're going to stay in Knoxville because they know that's where they can compete. That's where they can draw people in. And these minor league teams got to find different places to go. You can't just try to go to Las Vegas and Arlington and think people there are going to care, because those are Raiders and Cowboys fans. Why would I care about this minor league team?
Vegas would it be interesting about 20 years ago, like when the XFL just started, they had a Vegas team that time made sense, but now it doesn't.
Unless, and here's the one thing, unless you make them tied directly to the teams, like Arlington, what if they were attached to the Cowboys, or the Roughnecks attached to the Texans? That is an option. Like, you put a team in Memphis, have them attached to the Titans. That's always a choice.
But I mean, and I remember I was watching the documentary again, and the XFL, when they first started, the reason was, making the NFL was no fun. We're gonna have kind of a rough game and more promotion, and now it's just not as glamour as it was when back in 2000. And and it's a time when I feel like people are tuned off to football, because now everybody transitioned to basketball and even baseball.
Yeah, and as much as I love football, I just gotta be honest, I gotta have a break from football. I just watched football for 5 straight months, pretty much every single week, and that's the football I care about. I'm not going to make myself care about a spring football league with second-rate professional football players. It's just not happening. So
yeah, but good luck for the 8 teams competing in the extra fun league, as Vince McMahon would say, in the XFL. But actually, back to some actual football league news.
Yeah, the NFL. So I think we actually might have missed these last week. There's just so much with the Super Bowl recap. But so there are 2 new head coaches, both from the Eagles. They both lost their coordinators. You have Jonathan Gannon, the defensive coordinator for the Eagles, went to Arizona. And then Stan Steichen, I think that's how you say his name, the OC for the Eagles, went to Indianapolis. Indianapolis, they just announced their new OC. the always legendary Jim Bob Cooter, former Ball, is now their offensive coordinator. And as you're putting in a rundown right now, Eric Bieniemy, the longtime Chiefs OC, not getting a head coaching job, but he is going to, I believe, the Commanders to
Yeah.
be their OC.
I don't this weird hire like either one two things or Eric Bieniemy wants to prove he can develop another really good offensive model outside of Andy Reid, or he's just being overwhelmed by Patrick Mahomes because Bieniemy and Mahomes had some, you know, and some animosity over the past few years, like some glimpse of animosity.
Yeah, it really has been weird because it's been like the one guy that why is he not an OC? I mean, he's been a phenomenal OC, but then some people will be like, "Well, this is really Andy Reid's offense, not the enemy's offense." I think on the college level of our team, Alex Golish, he went off to South Florida to be his own head coach, and next year, what I'm really interested to see is how much of Golish are we going to miss in Knoxville? And vice versa, how much will Golish meets Heupel down in Tampa? Um, because this whole coordinator head coach dynamic is always super super fascinating. And Eric Bieniemy now, when he goes over to Washington, Ron Rivera is the defensive coach. Bieniemy is the head coach of the offense. It's his offense. He's going to be calling the plays. We're going to find out once and for all. What's this Andy Reid's doing that Patrick Mahomes has turned out as great as he has, and that offense has been as great as he has? Or can Eric Bieniemy figure something out? Now, for Washington, the question is who's going to be their quarterback? Are you going to stick with Sam Howell? Carson Wentz, obviously, no. I think Taylor Heineke, journeyman quarterback. Do you draft someone? Do you try to go for Derek Carr or something like that? Eric Bieniemy,
Aaron Rodgers.
maybe.
Yeah, I don't
Maybe.
know.
Could you imagine Aaron Rodgers in Washington, though, with all the conspiracy theories? That would be good times.
A weird fit, for say the least. I mean, I wonder how his retreat is going because I guess he's in this retreat.
Well, it shouldn't be over by now. It was like what 4 days. So I
Yeah,
guess he's back in the world. Hopefully, it was great. I wonder what he does on his retreats. I imagine it's a lot of fun stuff that he does in the 4-day retreats. I hope he reads some good books on the 4-day retreats.
yeah. I hope he. I hope and I hope I hope the Packers also had a retreat among themselves to really find ways to kind of get out of the situation because as we discussed before, Aaron Rodgers and and the Packers relationship is not working. It's just not working.
Yeah, I mean they definitely needed to take a hunting trip or something and figure something out. There's a lot of places you can hunt up there in northern Wisconsin and the Michigan UP. So, they as you said they needed to go figure it out. Real quick on these Arizona Cardinals Colts hires, how do you feel about those?
I don't know. I think hiring though two DC and OC from Eagles. I mean, they had really good one really good season. I don't know if they were enough to be proven as a head coach. I mean, as we discussed, Eric Bieniemy had a longer proven record comparing to Stain Shane, but
Shane, yeah. Oh, I misspelled that. It's Shane.
Shane Station, but maybe it might worked. I don't know. It's just I feel like as you point out, that's why Eric Bieniemy going to watch this. Like I guess I really need to leave Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes to maybe other teams
Oh,
see the value of my, the value of the offenses that I produce.
yeah. Also, one I needed to put on here, Todd Monken, who was the UGA offensive coordinator for the Bulldogs. He's now with the Baltimore Ravens as their OC, and UGA has brought back Mike Bobo, who was their longtime OC under Mark Richt. And the UGA fan base is kind of divided about it. Now, Mark Bobo, if you look at his numbers, put up pretty good numbers, but obviously he's associated with some chokes. His last team that he was the OC of was 2012. The team that lost by like 30 yards to Alabama. They got tackled in bounds. You know, Obviously, first and foremost, Tom Monken to the Ravens, he's going to have some serious rebuilding to do on that side because they're probably going to lose Lamar Jackson. They're going to have to completely redo the offense for whoever they get because they don't really have any outside fronts right now. So that's interesting. But then UGA, Todd Monken, if you really think about it, he was the OC down there for 2 years, and they won 2 national championships. And honestly, I don't think that's a coincidence. I think Tom Monken was a big reason for why Georgia won the title. I mean, yes, Georgia's defense was great the last 2 years, generational in 2021, really good last year. But Georgia's offense always held them back, but he made that offense, good enough. And as we saw against TCU, great.
I mean, he made Stetson Bennett look like he made Stetson Bennett a Heisman candidate. He made
which is
Stetson
bold.
Bennett Heisman candidate. I will leave it with that.
He was. I mean, yeah, I can't take it away from him. He was a Heisman finalist. As stupid as that was, he was a Heisman finalist. And you got to give Todd Monken credit for that.
Credit to Todd Monken. I mean, when an offensive coordinator is so good that you make an average quarterback a Heisman candidate, he had some. That's why the Ravens came calling.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting what Mike Bobo does. Because from what I remember watching his offense as a kid, they would put up a ton of points, but there was times where the play calls would become predictable. And you could slow Georgia down. Now, Georgia, obviously, talent-wise, is just incredible right now. So I think the most OCs would do really well with this offense. But as we have seen with Alabama and with Clemson, if you make the wrong coordinator hires, they can set your program back. I mean, look at Clemson last year. Their OC was terrible, Streeter. And that offense just did not play well against Notre Dame, South Carolina, or Tennessee. And he got booted for it. And they brought in Garrett Riley from TCU. Alabama defensively, I mean, look at, what was his name? Pete Golden. Defense was atrocious against Tennessee and LSU. And he got basically told you had to leave, so he went to Ole Miss. Coordinators are very important. And I'm deeply hoping maybe this sets them back a little bit, but I'm not banking on it.
And it's interesting. I guess Kirby Smart has been such a good coach right now. They're getting to a point that their coordinators leave, and Nick Saban. I mean, has been. I mean, you talk about their DC, but how about Bill O'Brien and their OC was not good. He was not good.
Did we ever talk about Tommy Rees? I don't think we ever talked about Tommy Rees. The hires they have now. So Bill O'Brien, he went back to the Patriots, I believe.
Yeah, he went back as the offensive coordinator for the New England Patriots after God knows what decision they brought a defensive coordinator as Matt Patricia as an OC. Like Bill Belichick.
This is what I forgot to put in last week. So I really want to talk about this. So Tommy Rees, Notre Dame's OC from last year. Notre Dame's offense wasn't very good last year. He's now Alabama's offensive coordinator. And they just lost Bryce Young and Jahmyr Gibbs. I really don't know about this hire for Alabama. This feels like an extremely risky hire for Nick Saban.
And I'll tell this. A lot of people say, oh, the end of the dynasty. But I'll say this. At the end of a dynasty, not only because you lose a few games, it's when you start making questionable hires and you have coordinators, they instead of leaving because they did so well, they leave because they didn't do so well. So that's why I don't know. I think Alabama's still going to be viable and competing for a national title for a couple of years, but I'm seeing the end of a tunnel.
I mean, are they going to get back to being the killers they used to be? I mean, think about this. When they came to Neyland last year, they were scared. They committed 17 penalties. That was not Nick Saban. That was not the Alabama we've come to expect. And this year is going to be telling for Alabama. Can they get back to being those dudes? Because they're kind of think about it, they got humiliated by Georgia, they've gotten humiliated by Tennessee, got humiliated by LSU. They've got basic losing streaks right now to all their rivals outside of Auburn.
And I mean,
It's going to be telling.
And it's not because of they being superior to Auburn. It's because Auburn is on a dumpster fire. They hire a coach from Idaho. He got fired, and now they're going to huge freeze, which did well in Liberty, but not a big program.
And has serious moral questions. But
Yeah.
he beat Alabama twice, so that was good enough for the Auburn man. And then Kevin Steele has DC for Alabama too. That just feels like a retread hire. I think you could have gone with a much younger, much more exciting hire if you're Alabama.
Wasn't Kevin Steele for a period interim head coach of UT?
Yeah, he was the interim head coach after we fired Pruitt.
Pruitt.
Yeah. So
yeah, he was
just kind of sitting
there. I remember he was, after Pruitt was fired for a while, he answered as the head football coach.
Yeah. And I think there was even a time where we thought about making him the head coach, but thank God we found Josh Heupel. So we did not go that way. Or otherwise, Tennessee would still be bad. But we'll see what Bama does. I mean, obviously, they're still very talented. I think they'll still be really good. I mean, they finished 5th in the country last year. I'm just interested to see what they do. Because I think Nick Saban right now is backed into a corner. I think seeing him basically getting laughed at the national title game by David Pollock, I mean that's the lowest moment of his career. Well, having to watch Georgia humiliate TCU in a year where he lost to Tennessee and LSU, and have being told to his face that Bama's no longer the dynasty. I am curious to see what Bama does. And Bama this year in Tuscaloosa has Texas, Tennessee, and LSU coming to town. So if you're going to get right, this is the year to get right for Alabama.
And I think Nick Saban, also another point of, the way this season he had to humiliate himself to kind of ask for a national title, to the playoff spot. I mean, when we ever thought about that, like Nick Saban was so strong, like you, so like, oh, we gotta make it. Like he had to beg on television, kind of.
Yeah, but I think also while I'm thinking about it, we're talking about how they were humiliated this year. Their 2 losses combined were by 4 points to the SEC West champion and the team that won the Orange Bowl. So it wasn't like he was losing to Georgia State or anything. I wouldn't know anything about losing to Georgia State, but
the thing is like we comparing to Alabama program from 3, 4, or 5 years ago to now, we see a decrease.
Oh yeah,
like a weekend program compared to, let's say, 2016, 17, 18, and 19.
I mean, next year's the first year in a very long time I think we have a chance to win Tuscaloosa. And that's because Bama is not what they used to be. I don't think we'll be the favorites down there, but I think we'll be, single-digit underdogs in Tuscaloosa. Like that's when was the last time we were single-digit underdogs down there? I mean, probably 20 years.
I think 2015 probably was the line.
What was that line? Let me check. Because I feel like we were 3-4 heading into that game. Now, granted, we should have been like 6-1. We just couldn't finish any games that year, or to save our lives. Let's see. What was the line? See, Bama was 8.5 last year. I'm trying to
find you. Oh, 14.5 point favorites.
Yeah, that was fine. I think that makes sense. What God, in 2017 they were favored by 34. Oh, I remember I was there too, and I think we lost by like 35. So, um, man, that was just the saddest thing ever when we were like 5 touchdown underdogs to Alabama because it didn't feel like a rivalry game. We were just lambs to the slaughter.
All 2017, that was a depressing year.
Yeah, it was terrible. The last time we were single digit underdog, we were 1 point favorites at Tuscaloosa in 2007, and so we were 1 point underdogs, or 1 point favorites in 2007. So every year since then, we have been multi
Double
digit
digit.
underdogs. In fact, last year was the first time we were single digit underdogs to Alabama since 2008. So, just to show you just how long Tennessee was truly irrelevant to Alabama. But thankfully, hopefully, the era of the third Saturday in October is back because college football needs that rivalry to be good because last year was one of the greatest games of all time. I'm not saying it's because I'm a Tennessee guy. I just think legitimately it was one of the greatest games ever played. Obviously, the iconic finish with everyone rushing the field and they're throwing goalposts in the river, like that will live in Tennessee lore, in college football lore forever. I mean, they were still talking about it last week in the Alabama-Tennessee basketball game, throwing the goalposts in the river. Like, no one's ever going to forget that. I mean,
Oh yeah, that's true. They'll live long in Knoxville sports memory.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like the only thing that would ever top that's a national championship. The only thing,
definitely.
or an SEC maybe. But anyway, so let's head to the pitch because here in America this week, the Major League Soccer is returning. And they're starting their new TV contract with Apple TV, which is going to be fascinating. This is the aspect I'm personally most excited for. I want to see how a major sport does on streaming, just completely on streaming. Not like NFL with just one game a week. The MLS is going head first into the pool with streaming, and it's going to be fascinating.
Yeah, some interesting matchups. The current champions, the Los Angeles FC, hosting the Los Angeles Galaxy. So LA Derby in week 1. We have the Nashville actually have the kicking off game versus NYCFC. NYCFC kind of worries me because they lost a lot of players in the market, a lot of players, and Nashville is favored to win actually this game. I know they play at home, but New York City FC losing a lot of players, even from to Brazilian teams. So you also have Nashville, NYCFC, Philadelphia, the runner-ups versus Columbus. Also, interesting fact: the city of Philadelphia lost 3 major titles in a span of this season: MLS, MLB, NFL. So, I'll be watch out 76ers. So you also have Cincinnati. Oh, go ahead.
I was about to say, 76ers, I mean, they're playing really well right now. But are they going to play well enough to get to the finals and lose?
On Saturday, you also have Cincinnati, Houston. You have Atlanta United versus San Jose Earthquakes. Also, Charlotte FC hosting New England Revolution. Orlando City hosting the New York Red Bulls. DC United hosting Toronto. Inter Miami versus Montreal. Austin versus the new franchise, St. Louis City SC. And then you also have on Saturday the FC Dallas and Minnesota, and also the LA Derby. On Sunday, you have Vancouver, Real Salt Lake, Portland Sporting KC, and then Seattle Sounders and Colorado Rockies. So good luck for those teams in the Major League Soccer. And hopefully we have a interesting championship like last year where LAFC won in the last seconds versus Philadelphia.
Yeah,
But
it's gonna be a fun season.
I'm tempted. I'm still not decided, but I'm tempted to get the Apple TV deal to watch some soccer in America. Hopefully, my NYCFC keeps relevant. They kept the Brazilian players, but I don't know if, but they lost a lot of players, so kind of scared about that. Real quick, some Brazilian football. Start with some transfer market news because Corinthians officially announced they're not pursuing Felipe Coutinho anymore. There was a big rumor that the former Barcelona player was joining Corinthians, but according to Corinthians football director, the player would not be, set on loan by the English club. So Aston Villa looking for a team to buy it, and Corinthians only will get it in a loan. So Corinthians not pursuing Felipe Coutinho. State championship here in São Paulo in week 9. Corinthians, speaking of which, had a really good win over Mirassol on Sunday. I mean, when they play at home, they play fantastic. The only question is they can't repeat that when they're on the road. But when they're home,
They're basically the basketballs. Basically, they're basketballs in
yeah,
Brazil.
they're basically that. At home, unbeatable. On the road, really stumbling. Santos, I guess they're not going to be relegated. They're making a comeback, won 4-0 against Portuguesa. Feel bad for the team from the city of São Paulo, which has heavily descended, like they have a lot of influence from the Portuguese community. But Santos 1 point behind second place Bragantino in Group A, so they're not going to be relegated anymore. They're fighting for a playoff spot, and thanks to Lucas Lima, the uh, Kerosh alone from
Yeah,
Bangladesh. Thank you
new
for
country.
what.
Let's go.
Let's go, New
Representing,
Orleans.
yeah, representing South Asia. So, hey,
Good, thanks for listening. And just to finish up, so Santos, have uh, had last 4 games, 2 wins, 1 draw, and 1 loss. I mean, they got we call the productivity contract. So Lucas Lima, he was in Palmeiras getting 1 million reais salary, one of the highest salary in Brazilian soccer. Got released after the contract finished in Palmeiras. So now he is under a 3 month contract with Santos, where he has a lot of goals to reach and a lot of stipulations if he wants to get his contract renewed. Played a really good game on Sunday, but it wasn't a really good team. It was Portuguesa, which is the bottom of the league, almost relegated. Like Sunday will be a true test because Santos hosts Corinthians on Sunday. So that will be a true test for the Santos team. Palmeiras playing on Wednesday. They're the only their team that has not been beaten in the Paulistão. They're playing Bragantino, another first division team, fighting for a playoff spot. And tomorrow, São Paulo going on the road plays São Bento. São Paulo experimenting a lot of this team. I think Rogério Ceni finding their starting 11, and I think Tuesday will be a really good test uh, for that. So, and I mean, and I covered some second division some second division state of São Paulo championship this week. I wish you guys know because it's better. Like second division state of São Paulo tournament is even for me more competitive and harder to win than the first division. It's like players in Brazil prefer to play in the second division of the state of São Paulo during the state championship kind of time than in teams in the first division nationally that play in a weaker state championships. That's show how competitive it is to play in the second division in the state of Sao Paulo.
curious. Speaking of how more competitive it is. Back down over in Rio, how is Flamengo doing? Because I know they suffered an embarrassment on the world stage. Are they recovering on the state level?
I I think they're gonna be just fine. They have a test this week. They're gonna play what we call the Recopa Sul-Americana. the Libertadores champions versus the Sul-Americana champions. They face Independiente del Valle. I think there'll be a test. I think Flamengo is a must-win kind of sole tournament. I think they're if they lose this 2 game tournament, I think Vitor Pereira. I don't know if he's gonna stay. Losing one tournament against a big rival was bad. Losing the semifinals in the FIFA World Cup was really bad. But losing a third time at home, the final game is at home. So Flamengo needs to win this Recopa Sul-Americana, or else if I don't see Vitor Pereira keeping his job. I mean, in the Rio tournament, in the Rio State Championship, Flamengo right now is in the first position, 6 wins and 2 ties and no losses. But again, they're competing against really bad teams. Like me and my friends talk about it. Teams in the outside of the big four, like Flamengo, Botafogo, Fluminense, and Vasco, outside of that, and maybe Volta Redonda, the other 7 teams, they would even be good in the second division here in Sao Paulo. That's how weak the state of Rio State Championship it is, in my opinion.
But they basically just sound like clubs in the ACC. Is what it sounds
Yeah,
like.
yeah. Flamengo's like Clemson in the ACC. Like Rio State Championship, like the ACC. You have Clemson, which is Flamengo. You have your Wake Forest, North Carolina, NC State, which is Botafogo, Fluminense, and Vasco. And then the rest of that is really bad.
Yeah. And it's kind of crazy. And you almost wonder if that really hurts them on a national level when they have to go play the Sao Paulo teams in the national leagues.
Yeah.
They're not getting tested.
That's true. Like Sao Paulo teams, they're getting tested because Corinthians lost to São Bernardo a couple of weeks ago. São Paulo had a hard time, hard win over Santo André a couple of weeks ago. They almost lost. Santos, was fighting for relegation. Now getting relieved. The only team was kind of getting ahead was Palmeiras because the superiority over the years. And even then, Palmeiras is still not the. He's still gonna fight for the first spot in their group. They're only 1 point ahead of São Bernardo, so they still need to win out those next 3 games to get home field advantage in the quarterfinals, just to show how tough it is. And compared to Rio, where Flamengo putting in reserves and still in the first place.
Yeah, it's just crazy just how much it really varies state by state like that. But I mean, I guess you have that here in the U.S. I mean, it's like Texas high school football is way different than Kentucky state football or Tennessee state football.
I compare more to like conferences. It's like what you said about college football conferences. You have the SEC, which is São Paulo, really strong. You have the teams that dominate: Palmeiras, Corinthians, São Paulo. Even Santos could be, sometimes a good force. But the teams even in the bottom, you have 5 teams in the first division, counting Bragantino, which is 1/4 of the Brazilian National League in one state championship.
Yeah, I mean that's just intense.
Yeah, and in the second division, you have Ponte Preta and Novo Horizontino, which is in the second division nationally. I know they're kind of, Ponte Preta is first place, kind of, really ahead, and Novo Horizontino also doing well. But the second division in the state of São Paulo is really competitive. It's really hard. I joke about it. Teams in Rio in first division will really have a hard time here in São Paulo because it varies. So it's like, like a Wake Forest or NC State or even North Carolina that, time to time get to the ACC championship would even survive in the SEC.
Yeah. I mean, Ohio State, what would their record every year? 8-4, probably. So it's or like you took Tennessee and put them in the Big Ten. I mean, how many years should we win the conference? How many years should we win the Pac-12, the ACC? I mean, I think we would have won the Pac-12 this year. I think we would have won the ACC this year. I think Ohio State would have been a dogfight for Tennessee. I think we would have won most of every other conference.
Yeah, it's like I said, if Santos was in Rio or even Minas Gerais State Championship, they will be really favored to win or even at least be already in the playoff. But here in Sao Paulo, they're fighting for their lives to get in the playoffs.
Yeah, that's pretty intense. But at least it's good to see Santos get back to form. I mean, I mean, I was really hoping to see them come out and play really well this year,
They,
and
I, I mean, to be honest, though, they play really well, but the team they defeated is doing so bad. I mean, but I really like Portuguesa. They're such a historical club, such a monument to the city of São Paulo. But and they're promoted to the first division in the state after 7 years, but they did not prepare themselves. They made a roster for a second division in the state championship to play in the first division. It doesn't work like that. They were not prepared. I don't think they're gonna sell. I think they're gonna be relegated by next week. So it's just sad because they're such a historical club. They're such a significant club, not only for the city of São Paulo, but the state of São Paulo. Like I was like, it's a stat that baffled me is that Portuguesa in the 90s had a better record than Flamengo. Like that's still crazy to think about it. But yeah, Portuguesa had it was the runner up in the national title in 96, went to the semifinals in in the national stage in 98. So they had a really good era in the 90s. In the word they
yeah,
got some titles in the 70s, state titles in the 60s and 70s. But unfortunately, they did not, they stopped in time. Of course, they had some problems off the field. They had a really good questionable relegation back in 2013. But it's just sad because the fans are really passionate, and it's just. And it was funny. I was watching the broadcast. The Portuguese has like a fan run radio, like a radio station dedicated to their team. And the broadcasts are so funny. They don't call like when there's like a goal for the opposite, like it comes to crossing, the other team scored. The other team scored. That was bad. It's something like that.
yeah. I'm looking at the table now, and I'm seeing that Portuguesa has 8 goals to 17 allowed.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
Their
bad.
defense is bad. Yeah, they're 2 points behind Ferroviária and 3 points behind Ituano and São Bento. So they're still alive in the relegation fight. But I mean, they play
Uh,
they play São Bento at home. That's the last chance. São Bento
So,
at home.
so I've got my question. So I see that Sal Bento is second in their group in Group C. So if they finish second, would they be in the playoffs right now?
Yeah, they'll be in the playoffs. Like so, the Paulista State Championship kind of system is weird. So they have four group as you see, Group A, B, and C, and
Yeah,
D. The first two advance, but but the last two in total, like out of the 16, get relegated. Doesn't matter which group. So if the Group C, Ituano and Ferroviária are the last in the overall tournament, they're gonna be relegated. So that's why São Bento is right now qualifying for the playoffs and also fighting for relegation at the same time.
I'm about to say because that could be a scenario where like at the end of the season, like they're either they win, they're in. If you lose, you're completely out of the whole thing. I mean, that's insane.
Yeah, that's insane. Like literally right now, São Bento is, you know, fighting for to the playoffs, but also fighting for relegation because they're, same number of points of Ituano, but they're 3 points above Portuguesa and 1 point. Like this Group C is interesting because this Group
I,
C looks like one is going to be relegated and one is going to be in the playoffs out of São Bento, Ituano, and Ferroviária. So that fight's going to be
I see
interesting.
it. I see Sal Bento doesn't score. They only have 5 goals.
Yeah, and I think out of those 5 goals, most of them was scored by one player, Marcos Junior. He scored the majority of their goals this season.
Yeah, I mean, hey, I mean, I do have to give them credit. I mean, they only gave up 8, so I mean, they're doing good defense. I get if I had to guess, I've never watched them play. They run like a basically a park the bus.
Yeah, that's kind of park the bus. That's what we call the Paulo Roberto Santos style. A lot of defense and counterattacks.
Yeah, it's it'll be incredibly boring to watch. But hey, I mean, I guess if they have no one that can score, you just got to do what you can do. And hey, they might make the playoffs with it. So
Yeah.
okay, so who would play who? So would it be like the second in like Group B plays the first in Group A, and like vice versa,
No.
like in the World Cup?
So right now, like first play second in each group because in the Paulistão, all teams play like for example, the teams from Group A don't play each other. They play teams from Group B, C, and D. Group B teams play the teams from Group A, C, and D. I think you got the point. And then on the
Okay,
playoff,
so it's the opposite of the World Cup. So you don't play the people in your group.
yes, because the state federation was back into a corner because they needed to find a format where they had to play the minimum games possible in a regular season, but also keeping the classicals, the derbies, viable. That's why they had the format. That's why the big teams are spread out in other groups so that you keep the big games in the regular season still going, but you keep the regular season game into a minimum. That's why you only play 12 weeks.
Okay.
That's the only way they found. So right now it would have been Botafogo and Bragantino in Ribeirão Preto, São Paulo and Água Santa in Morumbi, Corinthians hosting São Bento, and Palmeiras hosting São Bernardo. My guess is I think one of the big four, I think Santos going to get in, but it's going to be second, and I think São Paulo is going to be second too.
Okay. And right now, so I would guess Palmeiras beats Cerro Bernardo. I would guess Corinthians beats São Bento. Sao Paulo Agua Santa, that could go either way.
Yeah, because Agua Santa right now has been really good. They had a slow start. They had two losses and two ties, but now got 5 wins out of the last 6 games, and their only loss was to Palmeiras at home. So I think Agua Santa is going to give a hard time.
I think the most interesting team to me on this team is Vero Varia. Like, it looks like they can score. They got 10 goals, but they're
Yeah.
giving up a ton too. What's up with them?
And actually, one of their players, I think, are going to the MLS. I believe. I want to check it out, but which is John Kennedy. He was in Fluminense in the Fluminense, and now they're going. Think from what I remember, I think it was an MLS team. Uh, I want to confirm, but John Kennedy was playing really well.
Huh. Quite
Chicago Fire, 15 million reais for John Kennedy. Was playing really well. He's also he scored 6 goals in 8 games in Paulistão, and he's been kind of rumored to go to America for Chicago Fire.
I was about to say, because I thought, obviously with that name, I thought he was American, but I'm looking at him now. He's Brazilian. From Itawana.
Yeah.
Yeah, did I say that right?
He had what?
Itawana. And
Ferroviária.
Okay.
He plays for Ferroviária.
Yeah.
But he started in Fluminense. He was a really good, promising player. Had some disciplinary issues, but now I think he's getting his career back on track. But also, really sad situation. Inter de Limeira lost to Água Santa, but that was not the only problem they had on weekend. They had a really bad flooding. What rained in one Saturday was, I think, expected for a whole month. So it was a really bad flooding in Limeira. The parking lot had a really bad flooding. The press area, the entrance of the stadium. So now they have a problem. They currently right now had to fix those flooding issues and fix some things so they can play their last home game on the regular season on Saturday. So it's still unknown if Inter de Limeira is going to play at home or not, which is a crucial game because they play Guarani and both have 10 points. So whoever loses this game might be fighting for relegation coming on the last week.
Yeah, I'm seeing the news article on this now. Sal Sebastião.
Oh, so yeah, that's also in the sea, in the beach areas is also, my thoughts and prayers go to the families of beach cities like São Sebastião, Ilha Bela, Caraguatatuba, Bertioga, affected by this really bad flooding. The president Lula and São Paulo governor Tarcísio de Freitas are there monitoring the situation. All those cities declared state of emergency. So it was a really bad rainy weekend, not only in Limeira but also in the cities in the sea area in the state of São Paulo.
It's terrible. Definitely hoping everyone there will be able to recover, and obviously prayers for those who were the victims.
Yeah, definitely. Unfortunately a bad tradition in Brazil. Every January, February comes, and we still have to deal with flooding and rain issues. And I mean, in Americana, weirdly didn't rain, but it's been raining a lot here. So but in terms of the soccer side of it, I feel like if Inter Limeira doesn't play at home, it's going to be hard because Guarani also fired their coach Mozart, so they're also coming to a lot of pressure. So it's going to be interesting last 2 weeks of São Paulo State Championship. So I'll definitely give you the update. But that's it for Two Countries, Two Americas, All Sports, episode 65, right, Nick?
Absolutely. You have been watching the only podcast or listening to the only podcast that covers both American and Brazilian sports. Obviously, in the coming weeks, we'll have a lot more on March Madness and whatever else happens in the American sport landscape. And of course, more state championships from Brazil. From Americana Sao Paulo, Brazil, you've been listening to Gus Tomazeli. And from Chattanooga, Tennessee, United States, you've been listening to Nick Hill. And you have been listening to episode 65 of Two Countries, Two Americas, All Sports. Have a great week.
With hip hop mixed up with some